Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter, and today I'm painting Birchseed the Ent. He's one of the Ents you can see in the Two Towers, the second Lord of the Rings movie, attacking Saruman's armies and eventually defeating him. I really love this character. He's kind of a bold, big tree. Not a tree, it's an Ent. And you can see here I primed it in a black first and then over-primed it with a gray spray, adding some magnets to the bottom, but it's just for my storage. And the benefit of painting black and then gray is that you create some natural shading before we start painting them. And I'm starting to paint the base colors with contrast paints. So that's why I use this color differentiation before I start painting. Now for the base color I'm using wildwood, and I thinned it down to I think about 2 parts contrast paint, 1 part water, so you keep most of the paint because it's quite thick and I didn't want it to be too dark to start off with. So you can see me here basing the whole model. I'm not really looking to the leaves, because if you paint them with this contrast paint, you can easily paint over them with some white or gray or whatever you use as a base color and fix that. So that's not a big deal. Just make sure to cover the entire body. And maybe it's just me, but sometimes with these contrast paints you think you have painted it all and it dries up and you see that you missed a couple of spots. So it's like this paint is pulling together or something like that. So when I finished the model, and you can see the finished result here of my painting, you can still see some grays underneath his legs, underneath his left arm. You can see just between the legs there's a bit of gray showing, below his nose, below the leaves. So what I did there is I went over it again until I had some full coverage. Now once done, I took Baneblade Brown and a large dry brush and started covering most of the bark. Because birch seed is, well, it's a birch tree, so it's quite a bright tree, not a really dark one. Of course you can make of it whatever you want, but that's what I chose for. And Baneblade Brown is a natural color to follow up on the wildwood we used before. Make sure to focus on the top parts of the Ent, and leave the shaded parts as they are. But still, it's quite a large area, so take your time here. And again, it's not that big of a deal if you touched some part of the vines or the leaves or whatever. Just go over it afterwards. You should have something like this when you're finished. Now it's looking quite bright already, but we're going to take it a little step further. And to do so, I am using Rock Art Flash, which is a nice follow-up color to the Baneblade we used before, and this time just focus on the very top of the model. So it's face, so to say, top of the arms, like they're muscles or something. They have some beautiful highlights possibilities because there's a lot of detail in this model. It's one of the bigger Lord of the Rings models. It's a quite expensive model, so you want to have a nice result. And I had it lying around, and with the new Ent coming up later this year, I wanted to have him finished before that. Next, I took a Palette Witch Flesh as a final highlight, an extreme highlight. So focus only on the shoulders, the very tips of the branches, add some detail to his face, and I left the parts of the bark coming from his head, his hair, so to say. I left them as they were because I'm gonna make them darker. For that I'm using snakebite leather, which is kind of a green-brown coat, and a perfect addition for a tree because you have some different brown tones, you have some greens in there. So brown is never a monotone color. It's a mixture of different types of browns and greens in my case. So that's what I'm going for. And you can see the result here is getting along very nice. I focused the green parts on the bottom parts of the branches as it were kind of moist or yeah, shady, darker, maybe wet parts. And the branches on his head are nice and dark as they were like hair. For the leaves I'm using Lupercal green. And you might notice that the darker parts are gone now, but it's because I filmed this earlier. So for this I focused on all the vines going around his body and some of the leaves on his branches. I decided to do the leaves in 3 colors, which is more or less the same as the box art, and I like to have some variation in the color of leaves. You can choose, of course, whatever you prefer, but this was my choice. The vines go all around his body, up to his shoulders, so take your time and just paint all these with the same color. And next to it, a dry brush, I mixed some palette witch flesh in the Lupercal green and created some highlights. There are some nice edges to highlight some details in those leaves. Just go over them quite roughly if you want. It's not really that big of a deal if you hit the tree, but try and stay to the leaves. And you see some of the leaves on his branches that I also painted green in this process. We're going to shade them a bit later on. Now for the bright leaves I'm using Uruk flesh. You can use any bright green you have. I wanted to look like really like fresh leaves, you know, like spring leaves. And for some reason this tree has all types of leaves. I like this tiny detail, which is also on the box art. He has a multicolored leaf tree. The third color I'm using is Balor brown, as if they are like the old leaves on his body. And remember, this is not a tree, this is an ent, and they can do whatever they want. So that's basically why this one has 3 colors of leaves. I can find no other reason, but I like the detail. So Balor brown to create my third color of leaves, and I thought this was more than enough. You can make any kinds of variations you want, of course. And we're going to brighten up these leaves as well using Ogrim Camo. And Ogrim Camo is a very bright green, so I'm using that on the bright green leaves. It is kind of a yellowy look. If you want, you can use maybe a Shapti bone and mix that into the Uruk flesh. I'm actually using a Shapti bone on the brown leaves because it's a nice and yellow brown addition to the brown we painted before. And after I'm done with this, I'm going to add some Agrax Earth Shade in a thinned down version, maybe 1:1, with some water, and wash all of those leaves so you can see the details coming back, otherwise they are way too bright. And you can see these nice vines in the leaves, all the details coming back to it. Make sure to touch all of them because it's easy to forget some. Next, some Athonian Camo shade on the green leaves, because you do not want to have the green leaves to be brown. And for this I mean the bright green leaves. You can also do the dark green ones. And then some final details, the eyes. For that I used Palette Witch Flesh. And with the eyes I wanted to have a dark rim surrounding it. So don't paint the entire inside of this eye, but just the eyeball, and you get a nice dark edge around it, so it really pops out, if you know what I mean. With these larger size minis, it's easy to pick out those eyes, so please do so. Then with some Blood Angels Red, I used a contrast paint. I painted in the color of the eye, leaving some of the white surrounding it, and I focused on the top part of the eye, so made like a half circle on the top side of the eye. So it looks a bit menacing. He's angry. He's ready for war. You can kind of see what I mean here. Now with some Abaddon black, I painted in the pupil. So a tinier circle within the red area. Also like half a circle. Make sure that you have a fine tipped brush for this. And look at those nice tiny leaves here. Now, because this is such a large eye, you can add some shine to it by adding a tiny dot of palette witch flesh. So it looks like it's a tiny reflection in his eye. It's a very subtle detail that I am not able to see without glasses, but really makes the model stand out. Now I washed Iyanden yellow to about 3 parts of water to add as a glaze over the eyes so that it's a little bit off-white. You do not want it to be yellow, at least I do not want it to be yellow. So that's what I did, thinned it down really much. For the base I'm using Garagax Sewer to cover the entire base. You can see a black line here, that's where an elastic band was holding the model when I sprayed it. But once you go over it a couple of times, you're not going to be able to see it, or maybe prime it again if you want. Next, I'm covering the base with some rock art flesh as a first highlight. Be very careful with those leaves, I almost bent one of them. And then palette witch flesh as a final highlight on the bottom. I had sanded it before, and you can apply whatever you like to it, of course. I found some leaves that I glued to the base and some tufts of grass, and this is my end result. Birchseed the Ent, one of the mightiest younger Ents, which is saying a lot for Ents. And I really enjoy this final result. I love the wooden details, I love how muscular he looks, I love his face, the contrast we managed to create to the head, the hair, so to say, and all the colorful leaves that make him a bit more bright than just a wooden look. So thank you so much for watching again. I hope you like this kind of content. Please consider subscribing to the channel and do leave a comment. I love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!